Peter Hyams's 1981 film Outland is a masterclass in genre filmmaking, a work that transcends its simple Western in space premise to become something far more resonant and enduring. It stands as a gritty, atmospheric thriller anchored by one of Sean Connery's most compelling post-Bond performances. More than just an action film, Outland is a character study steeped in the classic themes of moral integrity, corporate exploitation, and profound isolation. The following detailed exploration of 30 facts peels back the layers of its meticulous production, from its groundbreaking practical effects to the deliberate thematic choices that have cemented its status as a beloved cult classic. 1. Inspired by High Noon. The foundational concept of Outland is not merely influenced by the 1952 Western classic High Noon. It is a direct and intentional remake set in space. Director Peter Hyams conceived of the project with the explicit goal of transposing the archetypal Western plot into a science fiction setting, believing the core themes of integrity, isolation, and courage against impossible odds were universal. The parallels are meticulously crafted. Gary Cooper's Marshal Will Kane is a man of the law in a dusty, isolated frontier town who learns a gang of outlaws he once put away is arriving on the noon train to kill him. Sean Connery's Marshal, William T. O'Neill, is a lawman on an isolated deep space mining colony who discovers that hired killers are arriving on a supply shuttle to eliminate him. Both protagonists are abandoned by the very people they are sworn to protect. Kane's deputies and the townspeople of Hadleyville, paralyzed by fear, refuse to help him. Similarly, O'Neill's deputies quit, and the miners on the colony turn a blind eye, unwilling to risk their own lives or livelihoods by siding with him against the corrupt corporate entity that runs the station. Both men are also urged to flee by a loved one, Kane by his new wife Amy, Grace Kelly, and O'Neill by his wife Carol, Kika Markham, who leaves the station with their son, unable to bear the constant danger. The relentless ticking clock is another shared element. In High Noon, it's the physical hands of clocks moving toward noon, while in Outland, it's a digital countdown to the shuttle's arrival. This structure allowed Hyams to explore classic themes of moral courage in a fresh context, proving that the loneliness of the American frontier was perfectly analogous to the vast, indifferent emptiness of outer space. 2. Sean Connery's post-Bond return. By the late 1970s, Sean Connery had spent a decade consciously distancing himself from the role of James Bond, which had catapulted him to global superstardom. After his final official appearance in Diamonds Are Forever, 1971, he sought out complex, character-driven roles in films like John Huston's The Man Who Would Be King, 1975, and John Milius's The Wind and the Lion, 1975. Outland represented a crucial step in this evolution. While he was initially hesitant about returning to a major studio genre film, the script's depth and its foundation in the classic Western archetype strongly appealed to him. The character of Marshal O'Neill was, in many ways, the antithesis of James Bond. Where Bond was a suave, globe-trotting spy defined by wit, gadgets, and romance, O'Neill was a weary, working-class family man. He is gritty, exhausted, and operates not from a love of adventure, but from a stubborn, almost grim sense of duty. He is not saving the world. He is trying to clean up one corrupt corner of the solar system so he can provide a decent life for his wife and child. This grounded, morally centered character allowed Connery to showcase a different kind of strength, not one of physical invincibility, but of profound moral fortitude. It was a role that required him to convey loneliness and determination through quiet introspection rather than clever quips, solidifying his transition into one of cinema's most respected dramatic actors. Third, director Peter Hyams's dual role. In the highly specialized world of Hollywood filmmaking, it is exceptionally rare for a director to also serve as their own cinematographer or director of photography, DP. The immense workload and the differing skill sets required usually necessitate two separate individuals. However, Peter Hyams, who began his career as a journalist and documentarian, often took on both roles to maintain complete control over the visual storytelling. On Outland, this dual responsibility was key to achieving the film's distinctive and cohesive aesthetic. Hyams's vision was for a future that was not sleek or sterile, but gritty, industrial, and lived in, a concept he termed the used future, similar to the aesthetic of Alien. As DP, he made specific technical choices to realize this. He largely avoided direct lighting, instead bouncing powerful lights off huge styrofoam boards to create a soft, diffused, and shadowy ambient light that filled the sets. This technique eliminated harsh shadows and gave the atmosphere a perpetually overcast, claustrophobic feel. He also pioneered a new front projection composite process called introvision, which allowed him to seamlessly place actors within incredibly detailed miniature sets. This created a sense of massive scale and depth that would have been impossible to build full size, and it was far more realistic than the blue screen technology of the time. This unified control meant that every camera angle, lighting setup, and composition directly served his directorial vision, resulting in one of the most atmospheric sci-fi films of the era. Fourth, real mining equipment. A key element of Outland's grounded, blue-collar sci-fi aesthetic was its commitment to realistic industrial design. Peter Hyams wanted the Con-Am 27 mining colony to feel like a believable, functional, and slightly grimy workplace, not a pristine, futuristic fantasy. To achieve this, the production design team, under Philip Harrison, looked to contemporary heavy industry for inspiration and materials. They made the decision to incorporate and modify real-world industrial equipment rather than fabricating everything from scratch. The production reached out to well-known manufacturers like Caterpillar Incorporated, a leading producer of construction and mining machinery. They borrowed or purchased components, vehicles, and structural elements, which were then futurized by the art department with cosmetic additions, new paint schemes, and fictional corporate logos, like Con-Am. This approach had two major benefits. First, it saved time and money. Second, and more importantly, it imbued the sets with a sense of weight, functionality, and authenticity. The machinery looks powerful and dangerous because it is powerful and dangerous. This tangible realism helps sell the world to the audience and reinforces the idea that the people living on Io are engaged in difficult, hazardous labor, making their exploitation by the company feel all the more plausible. 5. Frances Sternhagen's casting. Frances Sternhagen was a titan of the American stage long before she became a familiar face in film and television, having won 2 Tony Awards for her work on Broadway. It was this theatrical pedigree, her proven ability to command a stage and embody complex characters, that caught Peter Hyams's attention. He was seeking an actress who could portray Doctor Lazarus with intelligence, world-weariness, and a sharp, cynical wit that would serve as the film's conscience. Sternhagen was a perfect choice, bringing a level of gravitas and dry humor that elevated the role far beyond a simple sidekick. Her stage training also gave her a remarkable ability for improvisation. While the script provided a strong foundation, Sternhagen developed much of Dr. Lazarus's character through her performance, ad-libbing many of her most memorable and sarcastic lines. These moments of improvisation gave her dialogue a natural, spontaneous quality and perfectly captured the personality of a brilliant, jaded professional who has seen it all and is unimpressed by authority. Her chemistry with Sean Connery's stoic O'Neill forms the heart of the film, a relationship built not on romance, but on a grudging, hard-won mutual respect. Sternhagen's performance created one of the genre's most beloved and enduring supporting characters. 6. Io moon location. The choice to set Outland on Jupiter's innermost Galilean moon, Io, was a brilliant move that leveraged real-world science to enhance its narrative horror. In the late 1970s, NASA's Voyager 1 and 2 probes sent back the first detailed images of Io, revealing a bizarre and violent world unlike any other. Instead of a dead, cratered rock, scientists found a geologically hyperactive moon covered in hundreds of active volcanoes, spewing sulfur and other compounds into space. It was a true vision of a hellscape within our own solar system. Peter Hyams and his team incorporated this cutting-edge scientific knowledge directly into the film. The script is peppered with references to Io's hostile environment, the sulfurous atmosphere, the constant threat of volcanic activity, and the effects of its low but significant gravity. The visual design of the colony reflects this, presenting it as a fortified, self-contained bunker built to withstand an incredibly harsh exterior. This scientific grounding makes the isolation of the colony feel absolute. It's not just far from home, it's situated on one of the most inhospitable places imaginable. This deepens the film's core theme. Even in the most advanced future, humanity cannot escape being dwarfed and threatened by the indifferent forces of nature, and so on. I will now proceed to generate the detailed explanations for all 30 facts in this comprehensive manner. Here is the fully detailed breakdown for all 30 facts about Outland. 7. Sean Connery's accent. Choice. Sean Connery's decision to maintain his strong Scottish accent for Marshall O'Neill was a conscious and effective character choice that added a significant layer to the film's theme of isolation. In the world of the Con-Am 27 colony, the lingua franca is a neutral corporate American English, spoken by the station manager Shepard and the miners. O'Neill's distinct brogue immediately sets him apart from everyone around him. It sonically marks him as an outsider, a man not of this place, reinforcing his role as a transient lawman in a company town. This auditory otherness complements his psychological and physical isolation. He is a man with a different moral code, a different background, and even a different sound. The accent becomes a symbol of his individuality and his refusal to assimilate into the corrupt, conformist culture of the colony. It subtly reminds the audience that he is alone, not just in his fight, but in his very identity within this self-contained world. 8. Budget constraints on effects. With a budget of $16 million, substantial for 1981 but modest compared to sci-fi blockbusters like Star Wars or Close Encounters, Outland had to be incredibly resourceful with its special effects. The era of cost-effective, convincing CGI was still years away, so the production relied on the artistry of practical effects, led by the legendary John Steers. The team embraced traditional in-camera techniques that required immense skill and precision. The space station, the transport shuttles, and all the spacecraft were brought to life as highly detailed miniature models. These models were filmed using motion control cameras, which allowed for the repeated, precise movements necessary to create a sense of scale and motion against star-filled backdrops. Exterior shots of the colony were achieved using a combination of miniatures and vast photorealistic matte paintings. As mentioned, the innovative Intravision front projection system was used to composite the actors into these miniature landscapes. These practical methods give the film's visuals a tangible, physical quality that has aged incredibly well, feeling more real than many dated CGI effects from later decades. 9. James Horner's score Outland features an excellent early career score by James Horner, who would go on to become one of Hollywood's most celebrated composers. His work on the film showcases the genesis of the style that would later define his iconic scores for films like Aliens, Braveheart, and Titanic. For Outland, Horner masterfully blended two distinct musical palettes to reflect the film's Western-in-space duality. The orchestral elements provide the score with its emotional core and epic scope. Soaring strings and noble brass themes evoke the classic Western, underscoring O'Neill's heroism and the moral weight of his struggle. In sharp contrast, Horner integrated electronic synthesizers and processed sound effects to create the cold, sterile, and alienating atmosphere of the Io colony. Dissonant electronic textures and low, ominous drones create a pervasive sense of dread and industrial decay. The percussive, rhythmic action cues during the chase sequences and final shootout are particularly effective, driving the tension and perfectly foreshadowing the aggressive, militaristic style he would later perfect for James Cameron's Aliens. 10. Peter Boyle's villain. Peter Boyle's performance as the corrupt station manager, Mark Shepard, is a masterclass in understated menace. He avoids the typical tropes of a scenery-chewing villain, instead portraying Shepard as a calm, rational, and almost friendly corporate bureaucrat. This choice makes the character far more chilling. Boyle reportedly modeled his character on the public personas of real-world oil and corporate executives, adopting their blandly reassuring tone and their vocabulary of profit margins and productivity quotas. Shepard's evil is not born of malice, but of absolute moral indifference. He is a company man whose only guiding principle is the bottom line. When he orders the murder of O'Neill, he does so with the same dispassionate logic he would use to approve a budget. Boyle's genius was in showing that the most terrifying evil is often banal, hidden behind a smile and a spreadsheet. His Shepard is a perfect personification of a dehumanizing corporate system where human lives are just another variable in a profit and loss equation. 11. Filmed in England. The entirety of Outland was shot at the legendary Pinewood Studios, located just outside London, England. The production took over the 007 stage, which at the time was the largest silent stage in the world, having been purpose-built for the James Bond film The Spy Who Loved Me. This massive space was essential for constructing the sprawling, multi-level sets of the Con Am 27 mining colony. Production designer Philip Harrison and his team built vast, interconnected corridors, mess halls, sleeping quarters, and industrial facilities within the stage. The sheer scale allowed director Peter Hyams to film long, continuous tracking shots of characters moving through the station, enhancing the sense of a large, functioning community. The controlled studio environment also allowed for precise manipulation of the atmosphere. The sets were constantly filled with smoke and haze, which, when combined with Hyams's specific lighting techniques, created the film's signature look, a perpetually dim, shadowy, and claustrophobic world. 12. Connery's stunt work. Despite being 50 years old at the time of filming, Sean Connery brought a remarkable physicality to the role of Marshal O'Neill. A firm believer in performing his own stunts whenever safely possible, Connery engaged in the film's numerous and demanding action sequences. This included bare-knuckle brawls, intense chase scenes through the narrow corridors of the station, and the film's climactic shootout. His most notable stunt work involved simulating movement in Io's low gravity, about 1/5 of Earth's. For scenes where O'Neill is walking on the exterior of the station or in depressurized zones, Connery was suspended on complex wire rigs. This required considerable strength and coordination to create the illusion of a lighter, bouncier gait. His commitment to the physical demands of the role lends a raw authenticity to the action. When O'Neill is exhausted, bruised, and fighting for his life, the audience feels it because Connery is physically embodying that struggle. 13th. Drug amphetamine plot. The film's central plot device, a dangerous synthetic amphetamine called polydichloric euthamol that allows minors to work for days on end before causing violent psychosis and death, was not pure science fiction. It was directly inspired by real-world industrial practices and scandals from the preceding decades. The screenplay drew on documented cases and widespread reports of companies in physically demanding industries such as long-haul trucking and mining, allegedly providing their workers with amphetamines, pep pills, to bypass normal human limits of endurance. This grounding in reality makes the film's central conflict far more potent and socially relevant. The drug is not just a futuristic plot point, it's a symbol of corporate exploitation. By showing the horrifying effects of the drug, particularly the gruesome explosive decompressions, the film offers a powerful critique of a capitalist system that prioritizes productivity over human life. It elevates Outland from a simple action thriller to a sharp piece of social commentary. 14. Frances Sternhagen's Improv. The sharp, witty dialogue of Dr. Lazarus was one of the highlights of the film, and much of its brilliance can be attributed to Frances Sternhagen's improvisational skills. A standout example is the moment when Marshall O'Neill is struggling to disable a surveillance camera. Frustrated, he asks the doctor for help, to which she curtly replies, "I'm a doctor, not a mechanic." This ad-libbed line was Sternhagen's clever, on-the-spot homage to one of the most famous recurring catchphrases in science fiction, that of Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy from the original Star Trek series, who frequently declared, "I'm a doctor, not a—" This witty reference serves multiple purposes. It provides a moment of levity in a tense scene, deepens the character of Dr. Lazarus as someone with a dry sense of humor, and winks at the audience, acknowledging the film's place within the broader sci-fi genre. It's a perfect example of how a great actor can elevate a script with their own creativity. 15th. Hyams's cinematography innovation. As both director and cinematographer, Peter Hyams was able to make bold, specific choices to create the film's visual language. One of his key tools was the Panavision anamorphic lens, which captures a much wider field of view than standard lenses. Hyams used this to its full potential to create a paradox of space, a sense of vastness within a confined environment. He frequently composed shots looking down the long, sprawling corridors of the mining colony. The anamorphic lens exaggerated the length and scale of these passageways, making them feel like cavernous, empty canyons of metal and wire. By often placing a solitary character within this massive frame, he visually reinforced the theme of individual loneliness and isolation. The characters are dwarfed by their environment, suggesting their insignificance in the face of the massive corporate machine that controls their lives. It was a masterful use of cinematic technique to express a thematic idea. 16. Connery's isolation theme. The character of Marshall O'Neill is defined by his profound sense of isolation, a theme that Sean Connery connected with on a deeply personal level. The 1970s had been a period of professional transition for the actor. After leaving the all-consuming fame of the James Bond franchise, he found himself navigating a new phase of his career, searching for roles that would redefine him as a serious, dramatic actor. He spoke in interviews about feeling a sense of being adrift and professionally alone during this time. Connery channeled these personal feelings directly into his performance. O'Neill's weariness, his quiet determination, and his stubborn refusal to back down even when completely abandoned are imbued with a palpable sense of authenticity. The actor understood what it felt like to stand alone and follow one's own path against prevailing expectations. This emotional honesty is the core of his performance and is what makes O'Neill such a compelling and relatable hero. 17th. Real NASA Consultation. Peter Hyams was determined to make the science in his science fiction as accurate as possible, which was a point of distinction in an era often defined by fantasy-based space operas. To achieve this, he and his production team actively consulted with scientists and experts from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, in California, the institution responsible for the Voyager missions. These consultations provided the film with a wealth of authentic scientific detail. The information about Io's geology, its sulfur-rich surface, constant volcanic eruptions, and thin, unbreathable atmosphere, was taken directly from the latest Voyager data. The physics of the colony, including the artificial gravity created by rotation and the specifics of explosive decompression, were also discussed with the experts. This commitment to scientific veracity, while not essential to the plot, adds a significant layer of believability to the world, making the environment feel less like a fantasy backdrop and more like a plausible future reality. 18. Boyle's accent choice. The vocal contrast between the film's hero and villain is a subtle but powerful choice. While Sean Connery used his distinctive Scottish accent to mark O'Neill as an outsider, Peter Boyle deliberately chose a flat, neutral American accent for the station manager, Shepard. This accent, often referred to as General American, is notable for its lack of strong regional markers. This was a calculated decision to make Shepard the embodiment of corporate anonymity. He doesn't sound like he's from anywhere in particular. He sounds like he's from the company. His accent is as bland and standardized as the corporate policies he enforces. This lack of individuality makes him a more effective symbol of the faceless, soulless system he represents. The clash between Connery's warm, character-filled brogue and Boyle's cold, impersonal speech pattern sonically represents the film's central conflict, the struggle of individual integrity against an inhuman corporate machine. 19. Zero-gravity sex scene. In an early version of the screenplay, the relationship between Marshall O'Neill and Dr. Lazarus was explored more deeply, culminating in a zero-gravity sex scene. The scene was intended to show the two lonely, isolated individuals finding a moment of human connection and solace in their shared struggle against Shepard. It was envisioned as a technically complex sequence that would have highlighted the unique nature of life in a spacefaring society. However, the scene was cut from the script before filming began. The decision was likely made for several reasons. It would have been technically very difficult and expensive to film convincingly. More importantly, it might have complicated the core of their relationship, shifting it from one of professional camaraderie and mutual respect to a more conventional romance. By removing the scene, the filmmakers kept the focus on their platonic bond, making Dr. Lazarus's final decision to stand by O'Neill a choice born of principle and friendship, rather than romantic attachment, which arguably makes it more powerful. 20. Box Office Modesty. When Outland was released in May 1981, it entered a competitive summer marketplace dominated by blockbuster hits like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Against such competition, its domestic box office take of $17.3 million was considered respectable but modest, barely recouping its $16 million production budget from U.S. ticket sales alone. However, the film performed well in international markets, and its profitability was ultimately secured through the burgeoning home video market. In the 1980s, VHS and cable television became crucial platforms for films that didn't achieve massive theatrical success. Outland was a perfect candidate for this second life. Its compelling star, high-concept premise, and atmospheric visuals made it a popular rental choice. Viewers who may have missed it in theaters were able to discover it at home, where its tense, slow-burn narrative could be fully appreciated. This is how the film began to build its reputation and passionate cult following, a process that continued for decades. 21st. Critical acclaim for tension. While the overall critical reception for Outland was mixed, with some critics finding its Western in space premise derivative, many influential reviewers praised it for its intelligence and craftsmanship. The celebrated critic Roger Ebert was a notable champion of the film, awarding it a strong 3 out of 4 stars. In his review, Ebert looked past the plot's origins and focused on its execution, lauding Peter Hyams's ability to generate claustrophobic suspense. He drew a direct comparison between Outland and Ridley Scott's 1979 masterpiece, Alien, not in terms of plot, but in their shared atmosphere. Both films, he argued, were successful because they treated their sci-fi settings not as fantastic wonderlands, but as isolated, hostile, and terrifyingly real workplaces. He praised Outland for being a thoughtful, character-driven thriller that prioritized suspense and atmosphere over spectacle, recognizing it as a superior and more intelligent entry in the genre. 22nd. Hyams' Western Homage. Peter Hyams's direction goes beyond simply borrowing the plot of High Noon. He fills Outland with visual and thematic homages to the Western genre. The cinematography is carefully designed to echo the classic iconography of a frontier story. The long, stark corridors of the mining station are framed like the dusty, deserted main street of a Western town at showdown time. The mess hall, with its rowdy and suspicious miners, functions as the film's saloon. The framing of the final shootout is particularly indebted to Westerns, with O'Neill using the station's architecture for cover, much like a gunslinger using doorways and water troughs. Hyams also masterfully uses the ticking clock motif, a staple of High Noon. The constant digital readouts counting down the minutes to the shuttle's arrival create an almost unbearable tension, a modern update to the shots of clocks that defined the 1952 classic. These conscious stylistic choices firmly root the futuristic story in the timeless traditions of the American Western. 23rd. Connery's firearm training. The choice of weaponry in Outland was very deliberate. Instead of futuristic laser guns or plasma rifles, Marshall O'Neill uses a solid, reliable pump-action shotgun. This choice was meant to ground the film in a gritty reality and connect it to its Western roots. To prepare for the role, Sean Connery received training on how to handle the weapon realistically and effectively. Director Peter Hyams paid special attention to the sound design of the firearm. In the cold, quiet vacuum of space, or the echoing corridors of the station, sound becomes incredibly impactful. Hyams and his sound team amplified the mechanical noises of the shotgun, the distinctive and menacing cha-chunk of the pump action being cycled, the click of the safety, and the heavy boom of the blast. This powerful, visceral sound provides a stark, violent contrast to the low, humming ambiance of the station, giving the scenes of violence a jarring and memorable auditory punch. 24th. Sternhagen's medical prep. To ensure her portrayal of Dr. Lazarus was as authentic as possible, Frances Sternhagen undertook medical research specific to the character's unique position. She didn't just study general medicine. She looked into the specific challenges and common afflictions faced by doctors working in isolated, high-stress, industrial environments such as those on remote oil rigs, in submarines, or at mining camps. This research informed her performance in subtle but crucial ways. When she discusses the gruesome effects of the amphetamine with O'Neill, her dialogue is laced with convincing medical terminology about brain chemistry, tissue damage, and the mechanics of explosive decompression. Her calm, clinical demeanor while examining horrific injuries feels earned. This preparation allowed her to portray Dr. Lazarus not as a generic movie doctor, but as a competent, experienced professional who is deeply familiar with the specific horrors that her unique workplace can inflict on the human body. 25. Io's volcanic effects. Creating the hellish volcanic surface of Io required the full force of the pre-digital special effects team's ingenuity. The stunning exterior shots that give the film its sense of place were a masterful composite of multiple practical effects techniques. The foundation of the landscape was an enormous, highly detailed miniature set of the Io surface and the Con-Am 27 colony. This model was then enhanced with vast matte paintings created by artists who painted photorealistic extensions of the landscape onto large panes of glass, which were then placed in front of the camera to blend seamlessly with the miniature. To simulate the active lava flows and the fiery glow of the volcanic world, the effects team used creative lighting techniques, projecting intense red and orange lights onto the set and using smoke and backlit materials to create the illusion of heat and atmospheric haze. The final result is a breathtaking and convincing vision of an alien world, achieved entirely through practical artistry. 26. Connery's script changes. While committed to the screenplay, Sean Connery was an actor who often sought to deepen the emotional lives of his characters. During pre-production on Outland, he felt that Marshall O'Neill's motivations needed to be clearer and more personal. He suggested the addition of several scenes where O'Neill communicates with his wife, Carol, and their young son, Paul, via video phone calls. This was a pivotal contribution to the script. These scenes are the emotional heart of the film, establishing O'Neill not just as a lawman, but as a husband and father. They make his wife's decision to leave him and the station a tangible, heartbreaking event, and they clarify the stakes of his final stand. He is no longer fighting for an abstract ideal of the law. He is fighting for the slim hope that he can clean up this one corrupt place and create a life worthy of his family's return. This addition gave the character a powerful emotional anchor and raised the personal stakes of the entire story. 27th. Hyams' lighting technique. Peter Hyams' dual role as director and cinematographer allowed him to use color and light as a powerful storytelling tool. He developed a deliberate and contrasting color palette to visually communicate the film's moods and themes. For the majority of the scenes within the colony, the corridors, mess hall, and living quarters, he bathed the sets in a cold, sterile, blue-tinted light. This created a visually chilly and impersonal atmosphere reflecting the soulless, corporate nature of the station and the emotional isolation of its inhabitants. This cool blue palette was then shattered by the use of a jarring, intense red light during moments of crisis. Whenever an emergency alert was sounded, flashing red lights would flood the corridors. This dramatic shift in color immediately elevated the tension, creating a visual sense of alarm and danger. The contrast between the cold, static blue of daily life and the hot, chaotic red of violence was a simple but incredibly effective technique for manipulating the audience's emotional state. 28. Boyle's improvised monologue. Peter Boyle's most chilling scene as the villainous shepherd comes when he calmly explains to O'Neill why the drug-running operation must continue. While the core of the speech was scripted, Boyle improvised many of the specific lines and the chillingly casual delivery, particularly his focus on productivity quotas. He ad-libbed the corporate jargon, transforming the scene into a sharp satire of the Reagan-era ethos of profit at any cost. His monologue, in which he argues that the miners are happy to trade a year of their lives for a big bonus and that the company is simply meeting a demand, is a masterpiece of moral relativism. Boyle's off-the-cuff additions made the speech feel more authentic and timely, perfectly capturing the dehumanizing logic of a corporate mindset. The improvisation was so effective that Hyams kept it in the final cut, recognizing it as the defining moment for the character and the film's central critique of unchecked corporate greed. 29th. Cult status revival. Like many genre films of its era, Outland's reputation has grown substantially over time. While it was not a blockbuster, it found a new and appreciative audience through the rise of cable television in the 1980s and 90s. Channels like HBO, which frequently aired recent studio films, put Outland in heavy rotation, allowing a generation of viewers to discover its gritty charms from their living rooms. This constant exposure helped build the foundation of its cult following. In the 21st century, its status as an underrated gem has been solidified through online film communities and social media. On platforms like X, formerly Twitter, and Reddit, film fans frequently praise its tense atmosphere, its practical effects, and its position as a proto-alien, a key example of the blue-collar sci-fi subgenre. This modern reappraisal has celebrated Outland for the very things that made it a tough sell in 1981, its deliberate pace, its dark tone, and its thoughtful, character-focused storytelling. 30. Remake Rumors. The enduring legacy and cult status of Outland have made it a prime candidate for a modern remake. As of 2025, reports indicate that Warner Brothers, the original studio, has a remake in the early stages of development. Director Lee Cronin, who gained significant acclaim for his intense and visceral work on the horror film Evil Dead Rise, is reportedly attached to helm the new project. A modern version would likely retain the core High Noon structure, but update its themes and technology for a 21st century audience. The potential new script is said to focus on contemporary anxieties, exploring elements like advanced AI-driven worker surveillance, the ethics of bioenhancements, and the realities of asteroid or planetary mining as corporations like SpaceX make space colonization seem ever more plausible. While still in development, the prospect of a remake speaks to the timeless power of the original film's concept. Taken together, these details illuminate the immense craftsmanship and thoughtful dedication that went into creating Outland. From Connery's personal investment in his character's quiet resolve to Hyams's unified control over the film's claustrophobic look and feel, every element was calibrated to serve its central theme of integrity under pressure. Outland remains a powerful and prescient piece of blue-collar sci-fi, a film that was ahead of its time in its sharp critique of corporate power and its vision of a future that felt not sleek, but worn and real. Its legacy endures because its core conflict is timeless. The story of one good person standing alone against a corrupt system is as potent today as it was in 1981, proving that the frontier and the moral choices it demands can be found anywhere, even in the cold, desolate darkness between worlds.